Welcome to the Sports Entrepreneurs Podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Lure, and we have a gentleman calling in all the way from Philadelphia today, Mr. Seth Berger. Welcome to the podcast, Seth.
Marcus, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, this is our second round here, and we won't go into why. We'll leave that a secret between us here. But this time we are recording, and therefore I'll be excited to be releasing this very soon here before the holidays. But, before we go there and jump too far ahead here, let me first do a quick introduction for everyone who might not recognize you. Seth is one of the co-founders of AND1, one of the top basketball shoe brands in the world till today. And he was founded that sort of coming out of high school, university here in the early 90s. And we're going to do a deep, nice look into this because it's just such an amazing story and brand behind it. Seth then founded a couple of other companies on the back of it, and we're going to dive into that as well. And Seth is currently the managing director of the Sixers Innovation Lab, which is part of Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment Group, obviously linked to the 76ers, Philadelphia 76ers, the basketball NBA team there. So we're going to go have another deep look into what the Sixers Innovation Lab is all about, and the great work you guys doing there. So those are sort of the big parts, and I'm sure we'll have some other fun stories in between here. But let's go back really how it all started, because that in itself is already such a great story. So Seth, please share with us how AND1, got started, because I remember last time you shared that the original idea was something very different.
Yes. So AND1 started as so many entrepreneurial journeys did, in that I was struggling to find a real job. Right. I had worked in politics for a couple of years out of undergrad. I went to University of Pennsylvania. Then at 23, I went back to grad school and I got an MBA at the Wharton School. Right. I, in the first summer, did a summer internship in investment banking. To say that I was terrible would be an understatement. And so unlike most of my cohort mates at grad school at the end of the summer, I did not get the thanks so much for coming, and we're looking forward to have you back next year. Here's your signing bonus and your first year's salary. Right. I got a thanks so much for coming. But I knew also I knew that I couldn't do that life, that being in the corporate world was just not going to be for me in so many ways. Yeah. But while I was at grad school, I had done a research project for a business called The Hoop. I grew up playing basketball. I played JV basketball in college. When I was in grad school, I spent more time playing basketball than I did studying. Unfortunately, my grades would reflect that. And so I had done this research project, and by hook or crook, I actually found myself in my second year of grad school in the final round for investment banking jobs in public finance. Right. And there was a really key decision I had to make. At that time, I was 25. I had no wife, no kids. I was broke. I was used to being broke. I wore T-shirts and shorts and drove a Honda Civic hatchback and was really comfortable with that life. I had made it to the third round of interviews with Goldman Sachs and Smith Barney for their public finance jobs. And at the same time, I had done this research project for The Hoop. Right. And then we had kind of modified The Hoop to a business called the AND1 database marketing business. And this was before Al Gore had invented the internet back in 1993, when lists and lists of consumers didn't exist, right? Yeah. So the idea for the AND1 database marketing business, and this was literally the only A I got in grad school, right, was that we were going to acquire the list of these thousands of consumers and sell those lists to Foot Locker, Nike, Reebok, and you name it. So long story short, I go to New York for a full day of interviews at Smith Barney, and I'm thinking I did great. And the next morning, I'm supposed to go to a full day of interviews at Goldman Sachs. And I do what I recommend a lot of young men should do when they have big decisions to make, is I got my best friend. We went to a bar. We met up with two other very close friends. You may or may not know them. One was named Jose Cuervo, and the other is named Jägermeister. So my best friend, Jay Gilbert, from high school, who had worked at McKinsey and gone to Stanford, super bright guy, great friend. My best friend still today. He and I and Jose and Jaeger spent a few hours together at a local bar, and he gave me advice it was the same advice that my business school professor, who was my mentor in the AND1 database marketing business research project, gave me. He said, listen, you're 25. You got no wife, no kids. If you don't go to pursue a business now, when will you do it?
Right.
And if you do, and it doesn't work, in 2 years, you can go get a job.
Right.
Like you'll be 27 with a Wharton degree. What's the worst that's going to happen here? You're broke now. You'll still be broke. And so I was like, Jay, you are my guy. You're my best friend for so many good reasons. So, I went back to my parents' apartment, slept on the couch that they had replaced my bed with. And the next morning at 8 o'clock, I got up and I called the guy at Goldman Sachs. And I said, thanks so much for the opportunity. I want to let you know that I'm not coming in today for the final round of interviews. I'm going to go start my own business. Yeah. And he said, no, you're not. Now, back then, 2 out of 800 kids in the class started our own businesses out of grad school. The opportunity cost was so high and businesses took so long to grow back then without technology. Right. So I was like, no, man, I'm going to go start my own business. It's going to be the AND1 database marketing business in basketball. I love basketball. I want to spend my life in basketball. And I'm going to start my own business. And he said, so you're going to work for Smith Barney, huh? And I was like, no, I'm going to start my own business. He said, all right, listen, kid, if it doesn't work out, you can always call. I said, thanks so much. So then I called the managing director of Smith Barney. And this is when I knew I'd make the right decision.
Because he said the same thing.
He said, and he'd become a friend of mine, Henry Reyes. I said, Henry, hey, I'm not coming. Thanks so much for yesterday. I want to remove my name from the process. I don't want to take a job for somebody else because I'm going to go start my own business. And he says, exactly, you're going to work for Goldman Sachs. I was like, no, man, I'm going to go start my own business. So with that, I literally went back to school. I walked across to then the bursar's office. It was really easy to get student loans back then. And I just maxed out my student loans, maxed out my visas, and started the AND1 database marketing business, which, for the record, as we've talked about in the past, was a terrible idea. I graduated on May 17th, 93, started the AND1 database marketing business. And within 6 weeks, we realized it was a horrendous idea. And not only was I broke, but I was going to stay broke, except with more debt. Right. But we quickly pivoted to apparel and footwear. And in the business of starting the database business, we realized that there was an opportunity in basketball apparel. And we could niche effectively Nike and Adidas and Reebok if we stuck to what we loved and what we knew, which was the basketball consumer. And that was really the beginning of AND1. It was actually in a pizza shop in Chicago. We had gone to a trade show and we made a final decision to basically dump the database business and start an apparel business. And my partner, Jay, still has framed those little pizza place napkins where we had 15 slogans, which formed the beginning of our brand, AND1. And so that's how it started. It was awesome. It was great. We were 3 kids, 25, and 21, and we just loved what we were doing, loved basketball, and wanted to do it. Yeah.
That's an awesome story. It's a great warm up there for a little more basketball story. But before we get into obviously you launched then I guess t-shirts first and then the shoes came later. I definitely want to go back in there. But I want to just sort of now in hindsight, right? Since you've 30 years later here, do you feel you are a natural entrepreneur, and therefore that was really your calling, or it was just, by that time you didn't know better and thought that this sounds like a good idea?
It's a great question. There are 2 things that I really want to do with my days. And 1 is have fun, and 2 is make a difference. Right. And whatever I'm pursuing, if it can fill both of those buckets, fantastic. If it can fill neither of those buckets, life is too short. If anything, this last year has shown us that. Right. And so for me, I was one of those kids that when I was in school, the idea that I was going to be in finance or in marketing or in sales or whatever it was, I felt like I was going to use one part of my brain. Mm. And what entrepreneurship does for me is two things. One is it is you have to use your entire brain. if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you have to be able to play different roles at different times, whatever your team needs. Right. And the second thing is, when you're an entrepreneur, it is a constant game. You are winning or you are losing every single day. Oh, yes. And competing is really fun for me. Competing is more fun than winning. It is being in the game that is so much fun. Right. And entrepreneurship, I think, is just a constant game every single day. So I think probably growing up playing sports, made me love that competition and relish that excitement. And so I think I probably became an entrepreneur as a kid. But also, importantly, Marcus, my dad started a law firm in 1969 with 0 clients and like 4 years of experience. Right. And he was broke. He was broke for a long time. And I saw his example of, hey, you know what? This is fun, and I can make a difference, and this would be a great way to spend my day. So I think I probably was raised an entrepreneur as opposed to born one. Right. And loved it. Loved it. And I'm sure, and you as an entrepreneur as well. Like people talk about entrepreneurs and not having a fear of failure. I really don't think that's what it is. I think we accept failure as part of the process all the time, but we want to love what we do every single day. Right. And that's what I think true entrepreneurs are. They just want to love what they do. That
is true. Yeah, I do think, having come across many entrepreneurs, and if I look at myself, there is a little bit of that. You have a fairly high pain threshold, which I think the average person maybe who just grabs a job or works in a job might not have. And that pain is again, all the failures you're dealing with, right, and the anxieties you have, and. You might not, doesn't mean you don't have that in a regular job, but that's what I've seen. Do you feel you have that sort of pain threshold as well?
I do, and I think another way to think about it is pride and ego. One of my favorite sayings is, ego is the brother of insecurity, and I don't have time for either. And so I think part of the reason that people shy away from being entrepreneurs is that the pain and humiliation of failure will be too much for them to take. And to your point, you're going to fail every single day as an entrepreneur. It's just a guarantee. If you're selling a product, more people are going to say no than yes. And you will have climbed the mountain when you have sold your business and exited. And until then, you are facing failure every single day. So I think you're totally right. If you can't deal with that pain, you can't be an entrepreneur. It just kind of has to bounce off of you. You just accept it as part of the process. Yeah,
absolutely. Now, before we get deeper into all this stuff, I do want to talk more AND1 because it's just, as I said, such a great story from what we just heard already, how you started and taking it to the second biggest sneaker brand in the country, or basketball apparel brand in the country. So there's let's just go through this a little deeper. Because you started off selling, T-shirts, right, with slogans on it, etc., and before you ever had your first shoe. So again, just talk us a bit through that, the early days of the company before you ended up at $285 million worth of revenue here.
Sure. The first and most important thing in anything we did is that we were our consumer. We loved basketball. We were 21, 25, and 25-year-old kids, and we decided we were going to focus on the 16-year-old male basketball consumer, right. And that we were going to someday be synonymous with basketball to that consumer. And that meant excluding other sports and other products. Right. So that was a really important decision we made right away. So for us, when you have no money and you have no experience, the easiest thing to do is silk screen some T-shirts. We had a really good logo. We called him The Player. It was a raceless, faceless embodiment of a basketball player in the 90s. Every kid could identify with him. Right. We had some slogans, and Marcus, we literally used to take Polaroids. Kids wouldn't know what Polaroids are today. Yeah. We used to take instant photographs of ourselves, acting out the T-shirts, walk them 3 blocks to a comic book artist who would render, he was a marble comic artist, who would render these Polaroids into actual graphics. We would take the graphics to a silk screener. The silk screener would, give us a few hundred shirts, and then we would take the shirts, go into my Honda Civic, drive up to 125th Street in New York, drive down to Macon, Georgia, see mom and pops and see big corporates, literally rolling in with our T-shirts in my best friend's garment, a travel bag. I can still see his North Face bag. We used to literally run into stores, and anyone that would see us would be like, "Hey, you want to see what I got behind door number 1?" Showing our T-shirts, right? And we got we got kicked out of stores. So it was amazing. So that's really how we started. Yeah. And what happened, and we got very lucky. Obviously any business person that ever tells you he or she is successful because they worked hard, they had great teammates, they understood the market, and they forget to add the element of luck. They're either lying to you or they're lying to themselves. We got super lucky, for example, in the fall of '93, when we were first going to sell our T-shirts, Michael Jordan retired from basketball for the first time. Okay. And as hard as it is to imagine today, the first time Jordan retired, his apparel and footwear stopped selling. So all of the retailers who needed basketball apparel on their shelves all of a sudden gave us an opportunity. And had Michael Jordan not retired, I wouldn't be on this podcast with you. Wow. Right? Okay. Interesting. So we started out selling T-shirts, and retailers measure sell-through based on how much you push every week. And the average push is 5% a week. Long story short, we were in 10 Foot Lockers in February of '94, and our stuff sold out at 33, 37, and 41%, our 3 T-shirts. Right. So by July of 1994, we were in 1,500 doors nationwide in Foot Locker. And so we basically entered the market from below with mom and pops and from the top with the number 1 national retailer in basketball. Right. So we got super lucky for them to see us, accept us, and then for the stuff to sell out. And then from there, we went into shorts. We felt we understood what the next version of shorts were going to be. So we made really big, baggy, thick mesh basketball shorts. We called them game shorts. And they had we introduced them in the spring of '95, and they had similar success. Right. And then eventually we went into shoes in '96, and we said, let's risk the entire company to try to get in the footwear business. And we almost went bankrupt by taking that risk, but it worked out. Yeah.
I was going to say, because going from T-shirts to sneakers, there's a little bit of a jump, right? There's slightly more to it to build a proper sneaker. You're producing them in China, or where was your manufacturer?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So we had made our T-shirts in the U.S., and then we started making our shorts initially in the U.S., and we were only losing $2 per every short when we started. So it was a great business. We figured we could make it up with the volume. If we would lose $2 at every short, eventually if we sold 1 million shorts, we could only lose $2 million. So we quickly had to pivot and make our shorts. We made our shorts in Taiwan. And then we met a couple agents who basically hooked us up with factories and went over to China to meet with basically 3 factory owners. We ended up creating a relationship with one factory who had made a bunch of other shoes, for the factories make the shoes for most of the same brands, Nike, Reebok, and Adidas. And they were incredibly trusting of us in terms of how they allowed us to basically finance our business. So when we started AND1, we raised $50,000, in September of '93 for pre-sold T-shirts. We didn't raise another penny of equity capital until we were doing $100 million of business. Wow. And we had partners who trusted us that we were going to pay them when we got paid before we paid anybody else. We didn't pay ourselves. But yeah, we went into shoes. It's a really amazing story because not only did we decide to take the risk to go into shoes, we signed an endorser out of Georgia Tech, a kid who had left Georgia Tech as a freshman, Stephon Marbury. Yeah. And we had been able to convince him to come with us instead of going with Nike, Reebok, and Adidas. Right. And then we still almost went bankrupt. Check this out. So in '96, we had $6 million of shoes on the water. Okay, and we didn't have $6 million in the bank, right? So $6 million in shoes on the water. It is late November, and they're supposed to. Sorry, it's early November, and they're supposed to hit the shore in LA like November 15th and be in the stores December 1st, right?
Christmas, yeah.
And Stephon Marbury is our lead guy. We're introducing the Marbury 1, the first AND1 shoe ever. Right. And I can still see it today. Jay and I, my partner, were sitting at the end of the Minnesota Timberwolves bench. He played for the Timberwolves. The Timberwolves had given us these great seats. We had given away 20,000 T-shirts with the marketing campaign, Breaking Ankles with Stephon Marbury, a picture of Stephon basically crossing up another player with an x-ray of that supposed player's broken ankle. We spent $2 million on a TV commercial, mostly on ESPN, Breaking Ankles with Stephon Marbury. So 4 minutes into the game, Stephon Marbury, in his third game wearing the AND1 Marbury 1 shoes, drives down the middle of the lane, jumps up, and I can still see Cadillac Anderson's feet. They called him Cadillac Anderson because his feet were as big as Cadillac's. Stephon lands on Cadillac Anderson's foot. He rolls his ankle.
Oh.
He is crying on the floor. They carry him, literally sit him down at the end of the bench next to me and Jay. He looks at me and Jay like he wants to kill us.
Oh, man.
And he literally suffers a very severe high ankle sprain and is out until March. And I literally called my CFO and my head of PR, and I was like, yeah, we're going bankrupt. We've got $6 million in shoes on the water. All the retailers are going to cancel these orders because Marbury just basically broke his ankle in our shoes, and we were running a campaign.
And you're running that campaign. Oh, my God.
We're running a campaign. It was literally, you could not make up the story of all the things that had gone more wrong in one specific moment than this.
That is
and it was
wild.
like, wow, this was great. It was a great 3 years. Thanks for coming. We had a shot. Everyone told us not to take the risk. We were, like you said, immune to the risk and the pain. And, well, there it is.
Wow.
And we got really lucky because our retailers basically hung with us. The shoes sold through, and then we got to the Marbury 2 that March, and the rest is history. Our revenue path was 1.7, 4.9, 14, 42, 70, 150, and it just, for the first 6 years, our business was a straight hockey stick. We got lucky so many times in the process.
That is awesome there. Now, before we move on, I wanted to stick a bit more that besides that when, let's say, you really didn't compete head on the way I would describe it. You went the streetwear part, right? Which is now even bigger, right? Streetwear is such a big thing for all the brands going retro and all this stuff. But that was sort of your focus right from the get go. And also, then you created obviously the mixtape tour, which again was all about street ballers and so on. So. I think there's another interesting element too. I think how you guys position it, and I love the slogans. Again, I'd love to know who came up with these slogans here. The one I found is they call me mayor because all I do is I work from downtown or something like this, right? I mean, this is just some great lines you guys are coming up there. Who was the creative guy in the group there who created these slogans?
So I'll tell you, there's one of our partners, Tom Austin, he was the creative genius behind most of the slogans. Every Monday morning we had to come to the office with 5 slogans, and the process usually went like this. One of my partners would come up with 5 slogans, they were terrible. Another one would recite his 5 slogans, they were terrible. Jay would recite 5, maybe one was pretty good. I would recite 5. Every other week, maybe one was good, and Tom would recite like 15, and 14 were good.
Okay.
and Tom is still today. Tom Austin he's still the smartest person I've ever met today. He is a genius, both left brain and right brain. He's creative. He's analytical. He's mathematical. He's everything. Right. And one day I asked him, I was like, Tommy, how do you come up with these slogans? And it's really an important story. He said, because I was like, look, I sit for like 30, 40 minutes and I'm, when I'm watching the game, I'm trying to come up with some stuff. And he said, well, I wake up Sunday, have breakfast, and then I sit in my room and think for about 12 hours. And eventually I have, 10 or 15 slogans. And in all seriousness, probably 4 or 5 of the 10 or 15 are good. Right. And I'm like, wait a minute. You spend 12 hours by yourself with no interruption, no sound, no nothing. And he's like, well, yeah, that's the total focus I need to do a great job at this. And it was amazing to me because that is the total focus that an athlete needs to be great, that an entrepreneur needs to be great. Like, if you are really committed, don't focus on something to which you will not commit, and don't commit to something on which you will not focus. And Tom was totally committed and totally focused. And it was a great lesson. The other part of it is, and this applies also to the mixtape tour, It's an amazing what you can accomplish when you don't care who gets the credit. So for us as a team, we were all aligned. We all had equity. We all wanted to succeed. We all wanted to win. It didn't matter whose idea it was. There was no pride of ownership in the ideas themselves. We just wanted to make the best decisions and have the best ideas. So the mixtape tour, in fact, wasn't even an idea that came up within the company. It was a 25-year-old kid named Bernie who had the idea. He was working at our ad agency, Crispin Porter Bogusky, out of Miami. Right. And one day he said, hey, you guys had this videotape from this Rucker All-Star game a few years ago. You should put it to music and make a mixtape out of it. And people will love it. And I said, well, what are you talking about? It's just like New York City basketball. And he's like, well, Seth, you grew up in New York City. Most of the people outside New York City and at least a number of other cities have not seen this type of basketball. You need to kind of share it with the world. Yeah. And I think it's a really important lesson. Like if you're a really good entrepreneur, really good business person, really good coach, really good athlete, you don't really care if the idea is yours. You just want to get to the right answer. Right. And so the mixtape tour, the original idea actually didn't come from us. It came from someone outside the company. But we were smart enough to listen. Right, and to be like, oh,
and again, I do believe that, from reading all a bit about the history, of course, this was definitely one of the little big breakthroughs, right? You took the tour around the world. Then, now today it has a different name, right? I think it's called Streetball Tour. But it is really what I remember, watching AND1 coming into Asia. This was really what AND1 was all about. Is this sort of street basketball part of it. Now everyone else has a 3-on-3 event. Adidas and Nike doing the same thing. But I felt like that was really where you guys came in and just changed the way people were looking at it, right? Being this sort of streetwear brand, streetball brand.
So I'll tell you what's interesting. When we when the mixtape tour became Streetball, the TV show, and the mixtape tour, at that point we were doing roughly $150 million in sales. Give or take a little bit, maybe 175, whatever it was. Our business went up and came right back down. Okay. And I was concerned that when we sold AND1, we had 103 NBA basketball players wearing our shoes. 103. We had 23% of the league, by far the second most number of players in the league of any of the sneaker brands. Right. But to your point, most people knew us for the mixtape tour. Right. And that took us out of the aspirational performance of being the best NBA basketball player you can be. So whether it was Latrell Sprewell, Kevin Garnett, Stephon Marbury, most consumers knew us for the mixtape tour. Right. And so I'm not really sure whether that actually helped our growth or hurt our growth at the end of the day. But what it was amazing, and we go back to have fun, make a difference. What was amazing about it was all of a sudden there was an opportunity for 15, 20 guys to be professional basketball players in the United States and around the world and have these careers that they weren't otherwise going to have because this new vehicle existed. And in terms of fans, they got to see like the excitement in the arenas when these guys would play. It was amazing. So I would never necessarily change the business outcome and try to stop that process because I thought it was, the mixtape tour and streetball was beautiful in and of itself. Whether it was good or bad for business, I think is actually debatable over time. Okay, interesting. We clearly got known for it. Like, you were obviously, I could tell from the surprise. You were surprised we had 103 NBA ball players wearing our shoes. Like, no way would you have imagined that, right? Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. You knew Professor, you knew Hot Sauce and Main Event, and I was glad for people to know us by them as well. Yeah. Great guys, great ball players. Yeah.
Interesting. Now I have two last. Actually, I need to quote one more here. It's just so much fun. My game is like rice. 1 minute and you're done. That's right.
I don't even know who came up with that one. It's crazy.
Now, obviously, by wrapping up the AND1 part is, you sold the business to a venture firm in 2005. Tell us about that, because it's an emotional thing for any entrepreneur who started a business, put his blood, sweat, and tears into it, and clearly this is what you guys did. You sweated it out, and now is that moment. And was it like, wow, this is what we all worked for, or what was the feeling there?
Interesting. So let me give you the exact history. In '99. We sold a piece of the company to a venture firm, TA Associates, out of Boston. And And
sorry, yeah, 99,
in that
not 2005, correct.
99, right. We sold the entire company in 2005. So in 99, and that company, the company was cash flow positive and had plenty of cash. That company, that cash went into the founders and original investors' pocketbooks. So again, an initial investor put in $5,000 and he got back $300,000 on his initial $5,000 investment 6 years later, right? Okay. And we, the partners, went from broke to should never be broke again. We did not get fabulously wealthy. So like the image of, you know, when you have a company this big, we have lots of partners. We gave lots of equity, and to everyone that we could in the company. But I went from literally in a flash, I had not paid off a penny of principal of my student loans in 1999 to I'm paying off my student loans. I actually didn't want to pay off my student loans. I told my wife, I said, no, I want to pay this every month so I remember what it was like to be broke. Right. And I never want to forget that. And she said, hell no, I don't want to do this every month. We're paying off your student loans. And we're paying off her student loans from college. We're paying off our student loans. Yeah. You know, what that transaction was great, but what it also meant, to your point, was that there was going to be another transaction, and we were eventually going to sell AND1. And then in 2000, and after that transaction, our business went up, went back down, and went back up, and we sold it on the way back up in 2005. Right. If we had maximized it, we would have sold it in 2001. In 2005, we sold it to a private shoe company, American Sporting Goods. Right. At that point, I had been doing the business for 12 years. My partners and I all kind of came from like the not-for-profit government world. And, you know, we've all wanted to, and you can see in the things we've done after AND1, just want to make a difference with our lives. Right. And none of us, I think, envisioned ourselves being like shoe dogs till we were 75, 80 years old, trying to make more money in shoes. Right. So when the opportunity to sell the business came, I think we were ready to sell the business. I really missed the people because I worked with my best friends, and the people that I worked with who weren't my friends became my best friends. So what was hard about selling that business was not that I wasn't going to go to work every day to sell shoes to Foot Locker and, you know, deal with endorsers and all those sorts of things. What was hard was I wasn't going to see these people again for the rest of our lives. You know, like when you work with somebody, you interact with them every single day. And, you know, some of us, like I'm really blessed to really like the people with whom I work. And so when you work in a company of 100 people and you care about 100 people, you're not going to see most of those people again. Right. And that was the hardest part of it. It wasn't about the business at that point, but it was like, man, I'm not going to see these people again. There are a couple people in the company this year that passed from COVID, and I literally had not seen them since the day we sold the company, and you know, we all kind of exited. And that was really hard. That was really sad. I loved the people that we had in that company.
Yeah. I can imagine. I mean, like I said, it's an incredible story, and we could spend the whole podcast just on it, but we have a few other things we wanted to cover, so I do want to move on. But I have one last question, because it just, coming here out of Asia, why do you guys, where does the name Tai Chi come from in your shoe? I know what it is, but how on earth, why would you use the word Tai Chi?
Yeah, so if you look at the design of the shoe, and you look at the original design of Tai Chi, that was actually the inspiration for the shoe. So Tai Chi, yin yang, right, and right. And so the actual design, if you look at the shoe from the top down, it's almost that yin yang Tai Chi design. And so that, the designer basically took that visual and made it into a shoe. And that was the shoe that Vince Carter won the slam dunk contest with. We're wearing the shoes for free, by the way, in terms of luck. Like he was in between sneaker. Yeah, he was in between sneaker company deals. He had left Puma, had not yet signed with Nike. His agent at the time, who eventually ended up going to jail, he embezzled from a bunch of money. His agent at the time was talking to us, was talking to Nike, was talking to Adidas. And he went to the All-Star game, and he wasn't going to sign a contract before the All-Star game. And we had sent him some shoes like everybody else had. And we were as surprised as anybody else when he walks out on a dunk contest and is wearing the Tai Chis. Oh, right, awesome. Winning, at that time was one of the best dunk contests ever in our shoes. Right. Yeah, awesome. we had signed Latrell Sprewell. In terms of luck, we had signed Latrell Sprewell when he was in Golden State. After he was suspended, he gets traded to the New York Knicks. They are in ninth place out of 8 for the NBA playoffs. They find their way into eighth place. They beat the Miami Heat on a buzzer beater down Houston in the first round. It's 8-1 in the Eastern Conference. Long story short, we're running a TV commercial with Latrell Sprewell, thinking they're going to be not in the playoffs. They go all the way to the NBA Finals. Spree averages 28 points a game. And in the 18 months after that, our sales tripled from 70 to 210 million. Wow. If Sprewell doesn't get traded from Golden State to New York, if Allen Houston doesn't shoot a brick that goes in, and the Knicks don't go all the way to the NBA Finals, again, I'm not on this podcast with you. And I had no control over any of that. That was just pure luck, right? It's amazing how much luck.
Yeah, exactly. And I've heard this so many times now when I interview other entrepreneurs that as much as we all don't want to, we all say we make our luck, and I do believe that's true, right? Through hard work and whatever other things come to it. But sometimes it is luck, and it also is timing, right? And that is a great segue into the next one here, because Hoopstv.com, which was a project, interestingly enough, you started with Scott O'Neill, I believe, or Scott was part of it. That was where, great idea, great concept, but it didn't obviously quite work as well as you guys had envisioned it, right? And maybe there, either whether the luck wasn't there or the timing wasn't as perfect, right? Talk a bit about that.
That's right. So Scott and I had met in 1994, literally at my first trade show. I was wearing a T-shirt and shorts, and Scott was wearing a suit and tie. He was selling sponsorships for the Nets, and we've become really close over the years. I think Scott is one of the most talented business people I've ever met. He's also a super close friend. He's also a leader and an incredibly caring person. So I thought what I should do is start a company and try to wreck this young man's career any way I could. I thought, he's got such a bright future, so let me start a company. Let me steal him away from his current job. Let me make him president and my partner, and then let me totally screw it up so I can hopefully make Scott O'Neill this great star that never was. And despite my best efforts, I couldn't do it. He has still turned out to be a rock star. Absolutely. So we started Hoopstv.com, and the idea was a really good idea. It was, look, there should be a place on the internet for basketball videos that shows everything from NBA all the way to street ball, and a place that is the house for basketball culture. The problem was, to your point, is the concept needed broadband to be 2 years ahead of where it was at the time. Right. And so we had built this great house, and unfortunately the walls kept crashing down. So we would literally, I remember our CTO at one point, our management team was meeting, and we had the same problem. We had spent a couple $1 million in TV, and we had a whole bunch of people coming to our website. The content was beautiful, and the site would crash. And the CTO said, well, what do you want me to do? It's the internet. And my head of sales said, well, I'm not here for an art project. And so it was a great line. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. The creative technical guys, they just got to realize at the end of the day, these are supposed to be businesses, not their art projects. Yeah. But so Scott and I tried as hard as we could, and we were just 2 years ahead of the curve. And I learned a ton from it. Was we became closer through the failure, and I just think the world of him. So in terms of luck, in 2016, Scott's running HBSC. He's done an unbelievable job with Josh Harris and David Blitzer and turning this franchise around, and then acquiring the Devils and Crystal Palace and building a multi-billion-dollar organization. These guys are amazing. And I was, at that time, my kids were grown, and I was thinking about going to buy a business. I was like, okay, it's 2016. Let me go make some more money. My kids are done spending time with daddy. And I was going to start a business. And Scott calls me and says, hey, listen, I'm starting this Sixers Innovation Lab. Do you want to run it? And the timing was literally perfect. He called me in January, and we talked about it on and off for a few months and came up with the concept. He gave me basically a blank piece of paper with my partner, Ryan Schuett, to come up with what the Sixers Innovation Lab really should be. But the concept is that we were going to leverage the know-how that Scott and Josh and David have, along with their resources and their connections, to help young businesses grow. And for me, is awesome because on the side, I'm a high school basketball coach. I've coached 3 lottery picks and 20 odd Division I players, and seeing young people grow is really rewarding for me. And so coaching effectively young entrepreneurs and investing in their businesses is a perfect way for me to spend what will be my hopefully last career professionally. So this opportunity that Scott gave me, to do this, just been amazing.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, and we're gonna get straight in there now. And just to comment on I guess Hoopstv. I launched SportsFix, which was an OTT platform a few years back, and we ended up a bit in a similar situation like you guys. We were a bit early. We probably didn't have as much funding as we needed to build that runway, even though the idea made sense, and someone will do it. There's no doubt about it that the delivery over OTT and if you're watching what's going on around the world now, the way traditional television is struggling, will be there. There's no doubt about it. But timing is such a crucial thing, and I see that all the time, that great ideas and great businesses just fail because of that. So it's definitely an amazing lesson there to be learned. Now let's get into the Sixes Innovation Lab, right? And you give a nice little prelude here already. You guys are you guys are based, I guess, out of the 76ers training complex. So that's an interesting one, directly linked, of course, to the team. And there's a whole bunch of services which you provide, right? There are obviously different type of these sort of labs and incubators and all those kind of companies or institutions are out there. How you guys differentiate yourself? What is the sort of the different USP you guys would be using?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there are a few things that the Sixers Innovation Lab offers that is different than a standard accelerator or incubator, if you will. Yeah. First off, from a cash perspective, we'll invest up to $1 million in new businesses. And usually, accelerators are investing 125 grand. That's right. Yeah, if we're willing to get behind our concepts and get behind our entrepreneurs in a more significant way right up front. Right. The second thing is, as we talked about before, the combination of Josh Harris, David Blitzer, Scott O'Neill is this great group that both provides input into these businesses and also access to almost any business person we need to get to. We're basically one email away from anyone. I'm not really connected, truth be told. They're very connected, right? In addition to super smart, right? So that's the second thing. We also, our head of corporate PR, Laura Toscani-Weems, is to say she's a rock star is like saying Mick Jagger was pretty good in rock and roll. Like Laura Toscani-Weems is unbelievable, and our companies get her services for free. So Hydrant, for example, one of our most successful companies, when we launched their PR, we were literally on Fox Business. Last May was their biggest day of sales by exponentially because of her, and she helps these young entrepreneurs prepare for being in the world of PR. We also have a relationship with Maven Creative, which is a strategic marketing agency out of Florida. Companies that come into the lab get 100 hours of services from Maven for free for website naming, logo, tagline, you name it. We have a relationship with Troutman Pepper now. They've been acquired law firm. And so we put all those things together. It used to be the space, but now our companies are all over the country. We decided that we would just invest in entrepreneurs wherever they are. And if it meant Ryan and I needed to be on planes before COVID and after COVID, we're happy to do it. And then the thing that I think is really important, and the reason that, quite frankly, I am doing this, is Ryan and I view ourselves as part of our entrepreneurs' management teams. We will only do 4 to 6 deals a year because we expect to, in the first year of a company, spend hours upon hours upon hours with them in any decision that they need help with. And we really view, most entrepreneurial teams now are teams of 2, sometimes 3, but usually teams of 2. And we view ourselves as a third part of the management team. Some of the phrases we will use is it takes 2 to disagree and 1 to referee, or 2 can groupthink and 1 can break the process. So that's how we kind of really operate. Right. We will also, and I think also important for entrepreneurs is, we'll support them in Series A. If a company's raising anywhere between $3 to $5 million, we and our investor group can manage it internally. So they don't need to waste the time 6 months, trying to go raise money. If they're doing well, we're going to support those companies.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So we really feel that with the combination of those resources that HBSE has, the capital, and the hours we're willing to commit, we should be able to help entrepreneurs make better decisions. Ultimately, right, the outcome of your life is influenced by two things: luck and the quality of your decisions. You can't control your luck, you can control the quality of your decisions, and so we try to help them make the best decisions they can.
Right. So how many companies do you currently have under your cohort or whatever you call them?
We have invested in 14. We sold one, or I should say they sold one. Yeah, we have 13 that we're currently invested in. There are some rock stars in that group. U.GG is an esports company. Hydrant is a hydration product. It's an absolute rock star. A company named Betterview is in the sports gambling space. Another company named Lowkey.gg is in the esports space. Another company named PowerSpike TV is in the streaming space. Okay. Those are some of the companies that we've invested in that have done, extremely well. Our return on capital, I don't remember exactly what it was, but I think at last take on paper it was 15x, and so it's ridiculous. Now we had one small exit, so these are not yet exits; these are just
valuations.
Valuations, right? But most of them are now actually other investors doing Series B, Series 1A or B deals. So we've been really fortunate with the success that our companies have had.
Yeah. And you shared obviously a couple of examples just now, but when I remember seeing here from your notes, you focus on consumer-facing products, consumer packaged goods, so ready drinks. So that's where Hydrant, I guess, comes in. Wellness products, sports betting, I guess, and esports. How did you define that? Was it anything which could fit and work, again, with the 76ers or the larger infrastructure of Harris Blitzer's group? Or how do you guys pick who you're going after or working with?
Yeah, right. I have to give Josh and David a tremendous amount of credit here. So the original idea was that we were going to focus on sports, entertainment, and technology. And that was in the world in which we were going to live. After a few months, I came to the couple conclusions. Number one, I'm really comfortable in B2C. I don't really understand B2B and what makes one widget different than another. Right. But I'm really comfortable in understanding the consumer side of the business. But I also felt that if we focused only on sports entertainment, there were too few companies who were going to want valuations that were too high and were going to build businesses that were too small if they were trying to sell to professional and collegiate programs. So we needed to expand what we were going to do and kind of change our governing rules, if you will. And so I said to them, I said, listen, let's have the freedom here to invest in any B2C business. It could be technology, sports, entertainment. It could be esports. It could be sports gambling. It could be consumer research. It could be apparel. And we'll find ways for HBSE to be able to help all of these companies because these guys are so resourced. Yeah. So we really try to focus in the B2C space. We know there's a recent B2B2C investment we've just made. There's a management team woman named Dana Kim and her partner Ethan Kellogg. One's a Wharton grad, one's a Penn Masters grad. Dana had worked in consumer research before she went back to Wharton. And as she was graduating, she was looking to pursue her business. And on the face of it, investing in a new consumer research firm is just kind of an odd thing for a venture capital firm to do, right? But for us, we looked at Dana and Ethan, and I was like, wow, this is an amazing team. They really understand their space. This isn't consumer, and there's a consumer element, so Ryan and I can provide some value here. And Dana doesn't need us to help understand what these companies need. Right. And a big part of what they do is branding and communication to the consumer. So, with the Sixers Innovate, when you originate the idea for the Sixers Innovation Lab, when you say, we're going to invest in Highlight, a consumer research company, you would probably think no. But at the end of the day, we want to invest in great entrepreneurs. We want to see those entrepreneurs grow. We want to see them succeed. We want to make a difference in what they do. And so that's why we decided to really expand to B2C.
Yeah. And that leads to another good question here. How do you look when you look at companies? What is the most important three things you focus on?
Yeah, great question. So 3 things: market, team, idea. And it's those things. First is the market one that we understand, that is either growing really quickly so it can scale, or big enough that there's an opportunity to create a sizable niche, number one. Right. So there are a lot of great business ideas, but the businesses are just too small, and the risk of failure is too high for us to invest. Second, and I think this is really most important, is do we believe in the team? You know, we have had, of the companies that have done best, they've been great teams. We've had a harder time with solo entrepreneurs. And so we really believe in teams, and we want to believe in, I would always invest in, hire, bet on young, talented people who are super smart and see the world and think there's nothing they cannot do, instead of someone who is experienced, who looks at the world and thinks, well, I can't do this, then I can't do that. That's kind of, when we built AND1, we would hire 21-year-old kids and give them ridiculous amounts of responsibility, because we believe at the end of the day, like most teams, most sports, talent's going to win. So we want to invest in really talented entrepreneurs. And then the third is really the idea. Because a lot of entrepreneurs, as you know, you come up with what you think is a good idea, but then you realize, as we did with AND1, 3 months in, you got to pivot. And then you might have to pivot again, and you might have to pivot again. But if you have great teams, they'll figure out, right? What's interesting in business today that is very different than when I started is when we were in business back then, without technology, for what it is today, you had to have the answers, and you had to guess right, and you had to really place some 55-45 bets as if you were at the roulette wheel or at a blackjack table. And now today, the best entrepreneurs are not the ones that have the most knowledge. They're the ones that ask the right questions, because technology allows you to find out the answer to almost any question you want to know the answer to today super quickly. So you can decide, like back in the day, we would come out with, say, 6 shoes. And we thought we knew which ones were good, and we had done focus groups with kids and 16-year-old kids and 12-year-old kids, et cetera, et cetera. But we would cross our fingers the first week those shoes hit the shelves to make, hoping that they were going to sell, right? You kind of hold your breath. Well, today what you do is you test all those things with consumers through the internet, through technology, and you already know what's going to work and what's not going to work. And if you're taking guesses, you're not humble enough to realize that you don't know the answers. So that level you had talked about earlier, that being able to deal with pain, I think entrepreneurs that are really humble are great, because they're like, hey, I don't know the answer, but I don't need to know the answer. I just need to know the question. And technology today helps these entrepreneurs figure out the answers.
Very interesting. Now, here's another question. And I can't remember whether I asked that last time. Do you, in terms of your focus of companies, is it all US-based firms right now, or are you already scanning the globe, and therefore Europe and Asia entrepreneurs have a chance to work with you as well?
U.S.-based companies, but what we found is overseas companies are pretty willing to set up Delaware C corporations and have a U.S.-based entity. So, our as long as they're willing to do that, we don't really care where they are.
Right. So out of the, let's say, 13, 14 groups there, is there someone who originates, let's say, out of Asia or out of UK or Europe or somewhere else in the world? Or
No. We were literally talking, not yet. We're talking to one group that is out of Ireland, that is going to literally set up a U.S.-based C Corp, and another one out of England that is also setting up a U.S.-based C Corp. So we have a partnership where mentors for Yellow, which is Snap's Accelerator program, and they always have in their cohort 4 or 5 companies from overseas. So we'll get there. There's as you know, there's a lot of talent all over the world. It doesn't have to be here. It's just a matter of when, not if.
But yeah, so it's not restricted by design. It's just it hasn't happened yet. So good. That's good for all my fellow entrepreneurs here in Asia who are listening. That there is a chance to work with that amazing team of people there back in the US. So I hope you get lots more calls now after people hear this here. because there is some amazing stuff. And I do some mentoring of a few groups here. And it's interesting from India to some groups in China, a group out of Israel, just doing some crazy stuff in a very unique way. Even one group out of New Zealand. We might have to come and knock on your door with some of those guys when the time is right.
Sounds
here.
Great.
Yeah, there's some, as I said, very, very different spaces. Now, before we start wrapping it up here, I would love to get a bit your thought on gaming and esports. Because you mentioned that you're investing in a couple of those groups. How do you see, again, coming more from, let's call it the real world of sports, the traditional world of sports, like myself, we're all, of course, drawn into what's happening in gaming and how it's exploding and so on. Where do you see the opportunities for both of them to work together, as well as maybe gaming one day becoming bigger than what I call real sports, traditional
stick
sports. Stick and ball stuff.
Yeah, stick and ball sports. Yeah. So I don't want to sound self-serving. It might end up coming off that way. In the internet days, in the boom. We raised money for Hoopstv.com at a $50 million valuation without a business.
Right.
And the idea is in those businesses that they would lose tons of money over time and eventually make lots of money.
Right.
There were so many dead bodies, right? And so few. Yep. And those few eventually make money. So I think what's going to happen in esports, first of all, I'm a true believer. Even though I am not a consumer, my kids are. And I absolutely believe that esports is real, and I believe that it is a worthwhile thing for these kids to be doing. There is no judgment here that it is worse than basketball or football. It is different. And in some ways, the access that technology provides, it might be bigger because there's so many more kids who can play these sports than can actually play basketball or soccer at a high level. So I think esports is fantastic. What I think will change, and I think we're starting to see it in valuations, is companies eventually are going to have to make money. Yep. And so the monetization side of this business is what's going to happen, I think, when the market comes back post-COVID, is there will be, a flight to quality. The companies that can generate cash flow, can make money, are going to be valued really highly. The companies that say, hey, listen, we can lose 10 million, then we can lose 20 million, then we can lose 50 million. Eventually, investors are going to say, we're not willing to fund those companies. You have to have you have to have revenue and a path to profitability.
Right.
And so I think we saw that in the internet days, right?
Yes.
There's so many companies that died because they just couldn't find a way to make money. And so I think that's the same thing here today. I do believe that, there will be millions and potentially billions of people watching the LCS, and watching the world finals of not only Riot's League of Legends, but Call of Duty and whatever the next great game is in 5 years. The last thing I'd say about this is interesting in terms of the games themselves. If you were to go back to the 1960s and you said, hey, the best investment in the 60s is not going to be a baseball team, but you should buy an NBA team basically for $1. And the best return on capital is going to be basketball, then football, then baseball.
Right.
In the 60s and 70s, and so we're talking about baseball is America's pastime.
Right.
So what happens, I think, with games today is that process is really scrunched. Right. So while I think League is here to stay as one of the dominant games, right, I think we will continue to see games 3 through 5 shuffle, and it will take their life cycles will continue to be 3 years. And so there's a significant risk in being wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you're spot on there. And I know you mentioned earlier a couple of companies you're investing in, which sounded there was some esports part to it. What exactly are they doing, the businesses you guys are involved in?
So there are basically 3 companies in the space. One is U.GG. It's a League of Legends platform. It's a website. It's now, I think, the 2,000th biggest website in the world. It's somewhere around there. It might be bigger, might be smaller. Millions upon millions of unique visitors every month and hundreds of millions of page views with almost 100 million minutes every month spent on that site. And what they basically do is they make it easier for League of Legends players to make pre-game decisions about the champions they will play and how they'll build their champions. And these kids are so smart, they've been able to figure out how to dissect the data so that you, the consumer, can make better decisions.
Oh,
and they are.
How do you spell you?
I saw them.
White, like
it's
the word
you. It's literally U, the letter U, .gg.
Oh, right. Okay. It's U.gg. Cool.
And what's interesting about these guys is when we invested in them, they had come from the world of finance. It's really similar, right? They had come from the world of finance. They loved esports. And they were 25 or 26 years old. And I looked at them and I was like, they are to esports what I was to basketball. Right. My partners and I were 25 years old. We loved basketball. We knew the consumer. These guys know the esports consumer in and out. And they're going to build a product that will absolutely respect their user. And they'll never, I never have to worry about them cheapening their product for cash. They're always going to respect their consumer. And they've done a phenomenal job. The second company is at a company named lowkey.gg. We just participated in one of their follow-on rounds. And a guy named Jesse Zhang graduated from Harvard at 20. So he is significantly brighter than I. And really has come up with this great concept that basically allows users in multiple games to capture the games that the highlights from the games that they have played and share those highlights on social media. And it's a really interesting service that he and his tech team created, and they're doing revenue, which is great. And the third company is a company named PowerSpike.tv. Angelo Damiano was just listed as, I think, one of the Forbes 30 under 30. We had met AJ when he was in Techstars with Techstars Mentors, and he was in the Techstars Atlanta program. They're one of our partners. Right. So AJ and his team basically have created a process that allows streamers and brands to connect in a really quick and meaningful way, so that if you're a streamer and you want to monetize your user base, and you're a brand and you want to connect with a streamer that is, has a really good reputation, then they've made a really seamless process for this to happen. And they also just raised at a significantly higher number. So those three companies, I kind of said a couple of years ago. I'll check them out there.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Sounds like
to your point, I had kind of said a couple of years ago to Ryan, who is my partner in the lab, and she is 29 now. I think she was 25 when we started. And in terms of talent, like, she had come from the world of PR, and in about 5 minutes, I knew that she was going to be a great VC, and I needed her to be my partner. She has this view on these businesses that I just don't have. She's really detailed, and she's generationally different. Yeah. And she looked at these businesses and looked at what AJ was doing. It was like, hey, look, this is going to work. And I was like, okay, let's go with it.
I love that. And
but it's funny. I had said to her, if all we do for the next 5 years is say yes to every esports investment and yes to every sports gambling investment, we will probably make money. It won't be really good. It won't be really good because there will be a lot of losses in there, as we talked about. Yeah. But those two spaces are just going to continue to grow.
They're very hot, absolutely. Yeah, and I like the part which you pointed out a few times, betting on young talent. And I know when I had Scott O'Neill on the podcast, he that was always a big thing for him as well. And I guess in Harry Blitzer in general, really, giving young talent a chance to shine. And I think that sounds like what you guys are doing, obviously, with the Sixers Innovation Lab here as well. So that was great, and a nice deep dive into it. And I know we're coming to the end here. It's late at night there for you already. But I want to wrap it up how we sort of started and getting back to your basketball roots, because you are a coach, and quite a successful coach here in high school. And again, it sounds like from listening to what you were saying earlier, really, this is sort of a big thing of passion for you as well, right? Coaching young kids. It's obviously different than when you coach them here at the Innovation Lab, where it's more about building a business and making money. In high school, you're teaching them to probably be good students and maybe one day have a career in basketball or just whatever, be a good person, right? Share a little about that. That's a great warm down session here for us.
Yeah, so I think I knew when I was 17 playing high school basketball that I eventually wanted to be a high school basketball coach.
Wow.
I love basketball. I love kids. And I love making a difference. So when I had the opportunity after we sold AND1, I went to the Westtown School where my kids were in school. At that time, my oldest was in kindergarten. And this wonderful, diverse Quaker community about 15 minutes from where we lived. And I said, do you need a volunteer assistant for your basketball team? And after 2 years, and they said, yes, come on. And I just studied and studied and studied. I have over 100 DVDs on basketball coaching. And I remember my first day of coaching, I thought I knew a lot about the game because I had played it for years. And I realized, oh, wow, I don't know anything. The level of detail that a good coach has versus a bad coach versus a player, it's just totally different. So I really had to study. And it's been an incredible experience. Like I coached high school basketball starting out because I wanted to make a difference in the lives of kids. I didn't want to go into politics and I didn't want to live in the not-for-profit world. But the Westtown School is a high academic school, has 20% student bodies international, 50% out of state, 25% students of color. It's just this really diverse community of incredibly smart kids. So what happened was we got really, again, lucky in that early on, a couple kids who ended up going to play Daniel Ochefu came early in my career. He ended up winning a national championship as a starting center at Villanova. And he came, and when he came, he was unknown. And then all of a sudden he blossomed at the time into, I think, the 50th ranked player in the United States. And we had a number of other kids who kept moving up. And so if they came as Division III players, they ended up as Ivy players. Or if they came as Ivy players, they ended up being high majors. So now we've coached, 3 lottery picks, 2 guys in the G League, again, I think 20-odd Division I players. Actually, interestingly, my oldest son plays golf in college. My middle son is now a freshman at Georgetown on the basketball team, scholarship player, and put up buckets the other night. So it's all kind of come full circle. But, yeah, I love it. I being a coach is who I am. And, we had a week off from basketball in the fall. And after, the week, I was like, I needed a break. And the first minute I was back in the gym, I was like, yeah, I just love being in the gym with these kids. So, if I could fast forward, my father just passed this year at 80, and if I could for the next 30 years from 9 to 5, and I'm not really a 9 o'clock guy. I'm more like a 10:30 to 6 guy. From 10:30 to 6, be a venture capitalist with a 6 Innovation Lab, and then from 7 to 9, be a high school basketball coach till I'm 80. That'd be a great way to spend the next 30 years.
I love that. Yeah, and again, as you said, it's coaching in both sense, right? Different type of coaching,
it's the same.
At the end of the day, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love that.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, awesome. I think this is such a great way to wrap it up and finish up here. Thank you so much for your time. This was fun. I can tell you this time we did record. Good news right there at the end. And as I said, let's hope we can do this again. I love the conversation. I love what you guys are doing there with the Innovation Lab. Hopefully, as I said, one day we'll have someone here from Asia join you, and maybe there's a way to participate in some fashion. I love this stuff, and please send my regards to everyone else, Scott, and of course, a shout out to Lara here earlier. And have a awesome. Great, holiday period there, right? Christmas and New Year is just around the corner, so happy holidays.
My man, thank you so much, Marcus. Had a blast. Happy holidays and stay safe.
Definitely. Same to you. Cheers.
Thanks,
Thank
brother.
you. Bye-bye.
The Sports Entrepreneurs by Marcus Luer podcasts are a collection of interviews and stories. All content in this podcast is the copyright of Marcus Luer. Reproduction and distribution of the presentation without written permission of the owner is prohibited. All rights reserved.